off by talking about economy and jobs. You've talked about this a lot of times, right, during debates and forums. You've advocated for a federal minimum wage of $50. So realistically, would it be signed into law during your U.S. Senate tenure were you to be elected as the next senator?
What I have talked about is how much it takes to live in California. That's the first thing. Secondly, when you look at the fact that here in California, we have a $16 minimum wage. At the federal level, it's $7.25. And so the first thing I would do in the Senate would be to work to pass the Raise the Wage Act, which would raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 to $17 by 2028. Okay, that's the federal minimum wage. But we can't forget that in California, we've got to talk about moving from a minimum wage to a living wage, and we must factor in affordability and must factor in income inequality, which continues to grow. When you look at many surveys which have been conducted, very valid surveys, it takes six figures to just barely make it in California, over $100,000. In many parts of California, 104, 110,000, 120, I've seen some up to 120,000, is low income. It's barely making it. And so I think what we have to do is talk about what it takes to live in California. People are working 2 and 3 jobs. They can't afford housing. They can't afford childcare. Price gouging is everywhere. They can't afford gasoline. And so we have to think big. We have to talk about, and realistically, I understand that $16 where we are now, maybe getting it to 20 in California, but we have to also remember and indexing what it means in terms of just barely making it and being able to not only survive but to thrive in California. You're talking about, a minimum wage that has as part of the factor affordability. And California is just not affordable for working families. And we have got to do something to bring the cost down of childcare, housing, gasoline, but we also have to address the affordability factor as well as income inequality.
Sure. So so you mentioned the Raise the Wage Act, which gave you a $17 federal minimum wage. So is that the realistic number that you would advocate for during your U.S. Senate tenure?
Immediately, yes. I would fight to, hitting the ground running, being able to do something that's going to immediately help families, then yes, Raise the Wage Act is what's on the table. It's what's been negotiated. It's what's been the bill that we're working on right now. But what I'm saying is that in California, we also have to look at what it takes to live. And recognize that we also have to help our small businesses invest more. I was a former small business owner. I know how employees, what happens to employees if they're stressed out, working 2 and 3 jobs, commuting 2 and 3 hours a day. So we have to really factor that in when we talk about what it takes to live in California.
Yeah, so I've also seen the MIT survey that you were referencing when you talked about the $50 figure. So how would small businesses afford that without passing the costs on to consumers?
No, and I'm talking about helping, again, former small business owner. We have to invest in small businesses. And the federal government has a responsibility, I think, to make sure that small businesses have access to capital, have access to everything that small businesses need. And we're talking about, not now, not tomorrow, but we're talking about corporations that, they're record profits. CEOs, billionaires, and so we have to see this in a comprehensive way. And we have to help our small businesses because, again, I know what it takes in a small business to really make sure that workers have the wages that they need to not have to leave California. So many are leaving California, and the primary reason is they cannot afford to live here. And so it's complicated, yes, but small businesses should not be impacted because we should be part of making this work for small businesses as well as for employees. And so oftentimes we forget about the workers and the employees. We don't even think about what it takes for them to live a decent life in California and take care of their families.
So are you saying that if a small business can't afford the sudden increase in minimum wage to pay that much to their employees, if that's the case, then what kind of federal policies would you advocate to make up and invest
Sure.
in small business?
Well, we have to have access to capital, first of all. I think we need to make sure that we invest in employees in terms of them being able to afford, bring down the cost of living. I mean, bring down costs is really key for small businesses as well as for employees, so that they can, the federal government needs to invest in affordable housing, for example, bringing down the cost of housing. More in child care, price gouging, we've got to get that under control. The oil companies, look at gasoline in California. I think we need to look at how we get these oil companies and these, to really stop gouging the public. And I think that enough has been written down. We know that that's what's taking place. And when you look at the tax structure and the Trump era tax cuts, billionaires, got off the hook. They need to pay their fair share of taxes. So we're talking about looking at economic issues and keeping it centered with small businesses and workers and employees so that they don't have to struggle like they're struggling now. And it's bold, it's big, but we have to have big ideas and we have to think big and work toward that. I'm not talking about tomorrow or next week. I'm talking about getting this federal minimum wage first raised to $17 an hour.
Yeah. Let's shift gears and talk about campaign finance, ethics. So you have championed overturning Citizens United. How is that practically possible, considering that the Supreme Court did rule that it did overturn it because they see it as a violation of First Amendment?
Well, corporations, if you believe corporations are not people, then the First Amendment with corporations really is not appropriate to use that yardstick.
But the Supreme Court already ruled it that way.
But I think that we need to overturn it because, they ruled that they were corporations, and we need to, and we haven't debated this enough in Congress, but we need to start with the fact that corporations are not people. Therefore, if corporations are not people, then corporations should be held to a different standard.
So how, in the Senate, do you plan to overturn this notion that corporations are?
That means building the political will, working across the aisle, ending the filibuster. I mean, it's not easy, but it's something that we have to, and we have legislation to do that. But in the Senate and even in the House, the margins are so close that this requires a heck of a lot of public will, public sentiment, working with members, Republicans and Democrats, working across the aisle, which I do, to convince members that this is unfair. And it really is, it does not allow people, ordinary folks, to run for public office if you're facing this dark money and this corporate infusion of corporate resources into campaigns. It's unfair and it's undemocratic.
Yeah, so you have talked about getting those big those big types of money, right, out of politics and root out corporate influence. How would you accomplish that, considering that corporations are still spending a lot on lobbying, super PACs? They are still giving in corporate PAC money, although you're rejecting it this election. How is that not just a campaign slogan? How is that a realistic plan?
Well, we should pass public financing of campaigns, period, and get the corporate money out of campaigns. I don't agree with the way the campaign finance system is built at this point and what it does. It's very discriminatory, and if you don't have access to money, if you aren't wealthy, if you don't have an agenda that pleases corporations, then it's very difficult to run in elections. And so we need to level the playing field by passing public financing of campaigns.
How do you do that when a lot of your colleagues already take corporation money or just private money, not instead of public campaign?
Well, if it were a level playing field, everyone would be equal. A wealthy colleague or someone who right now is taking corporate PAC money would not be able to take corporate PAC money, just as some of us who don't take corporate PAC money would not take corporate PAC money. So in a democracy, we have to have rules and regulations that are equal, that level the playing field. And right now, I'm pretty confident that many of our colleagues who take corporate PAC money, if they had access to the same type of resources that others have, that they would come around, because it would be they'd be freer in terms of their legislation, and in terms of positions they take, and in terms of what they do, knowing that they'll be able to raise money for a campaign and not have to worry about, for example, the NRA saying, you know, you can't support gun safety measures. There are many who would probably support reasonable gun safety measures if, in fact, they didn't get the money from the, just as an example, the NRA. They'd be freed up to fight for people rather than profits.
And real quick in this, to end this section, do you support banning Congress members from trading stocks, and how exactly would you make that happen, considering so many people?
Well, absolutely. Yes, there's several bills, and I support all of them. We just need to ban it. Insider trading is wrong. People elected us to represent them. And we need, in a democracy, it's a sacrifice to be an elected official, a public servant, and we know that going in. And so we have to have rules that allow the public to have faith in us, and that we're not going to use information that we get on the inside to make us wealthy, or at least help our personal lives in that sense. And so there are many bills that I'm supporting, I think all of them.
So I will shift gears to foreign policy. You've been clear on your support for a ceasefire in Gaza, and I believe you backed a bill that would set conditions to aid to Israel. I'm curious how you would approach, the aid package that was meant to go to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan. What would your approach to that be?
Well, I believe that any country that receives U.S. dollars must comply with standards of human rights, must comply with conditions that we place on all weapons transfers, arms sales, and that doesn't exclude any country. And if there are no conditions and no requirements, then I would not support it. And I've said that over and over and over again. And actually, one of the universities a couple of years ago had a report saying that I was the most effective Democrat in foreign policy and international relations, which I was very, very proud of, because I have a very deep and broad understanding and background in foreign policy and international relations. Actually, I was the first African American to chair the Appropriations Committee, subcommittee, that funds all of our international development, diplomacy, humanitarian assistance, all of our non-military financing and investments.
So if elected, how would you go about persuading your colleagues, on your viewpoints?
I've had to do that a lot over the years, persuade not only Democrats but Republicans. And that's showing them the facts and explaining and showing them that preventing wars, first of all, is how we achieve global peace and security. And therefore that means, one, investing more in diplomacy and development, and reducing our military budget. And I've been fighting that battle for many, many years, building some support now with Republicans, actually, to reduce the defense budget. Again, my budget, when I was chairing the State and Foreign Operations Committee, was probably about $60 billion. Defense was over $800 billion. These three legs to the stool of our foreign policy and national security: defense, diplomacy, development. We need to invest more in diplomacy, development, less in defense. And finally, I'll just say I've led the effort to, and again, how I convinced my colleagues, which I'm doing, led the effort to audit the Pentagon. When I learned a few years ago that the Pentagon had never been audited, the only federal agency, I said, wait a minute, knowing that there's waste, fraud, and abuse, but not knowing that the Pentagon had never been audited. When I learned that, I went to one of my Republican colleagues and I talked to him, and we both worked together to get the requirement that the Pentagon be audited. A couple of months ago, they failed the 6th audit. Now that's taxpayer dollars that are being misused. And in fact, when I talk to my colleagues, again, I take a lot of time with people who disagree with me. And I show them the facts. I explain to them what this 150 billion that we know is gone, what that would do in terms of our troops, our veterans, economic security for our troops when they come back from the wars that we've sent them to, for schools, health care. We have a lot of domestic priorities that 150 billion could address and not even touch our national security, and would keep us in a position where we would lead on global peace and security. And so it takes time to talk to members, but you have to be convincing, and I have been able to do that over the years.
So you also wear your vote against the Afghanistan war as a badge of honor. Are there any situations in which you would support U.S. military action?
Yeah. I don't know if I wear it as a badge of honor. That was a tough vote, you know. But that was a vote that, well, let me start with this. My dad was in the military. He was very proud as a patriotic military officer. He was in World War II. He was in the all-black 92nd Battalion in Italy, supporting the Normandy invasion. He was in Korea. He served in Japan. My father was the first one to call me after I voted against that 60-word blank check, said that was the right vote. Do not send our troops into harm's way, not knowing what you're doing. This was 3 days after the horrific attacks. 3 days, and it was a 60-word authorization that set the stage for forever wars. Any president could use force up until right now, and I'm trying to repeal it with some Republicans actually. And next, it gave away congressional responsibility and authority and constitutional requirements to then President Bush, but any subsequent president. I voted against Libya, I voted against the drone strikes, I voted with President Obama because, again, he did not have to come to Congress because of these authorizations that have been given over. And so it's not a badge of honor. It was a tough vote, but it was the right vote. And just right after, my opponent went to New York, and she walked in the Veterans Day parade with a sign of me smiling, saying Barbara Lee hates America, with the World Trade Towers in the background. I received death threats. I mean, and what I learned then was so many people don't really understand that central to our democracy is the right to dissent, because everyone came after me big time. But when you think that you're right, and when you have deliberated and realize that you have to go against the flow sometimes. You just have to do that against your own party, against whatever. And so with regard to troops, you know, I responded that as it relates to Taiwan, I would not send troops. The president has got to come to Congress to ask for authorization. You just don't give any president that authority. And so no, I would have to see, debate, understand what the facts on the ground are, why it is in the United States national security interest, why we should do that, and make decisions based on that, but not just say yes, go on just because. You know, that is just, it's wrong. We've been missing in action over the years, and it's something that I'm pretty adamant about as a military brat and as somebody who grew up in a military family.
And shifting gears just a little bit to immigration, do you support the bipartisan deal that was put before Congress recently, and if, you know, why or why not?
No, I don't support it, but let me just tell you, it's really an indication of what's happening with Donald Trump and how he's running the show, I say, in the Senate and in the House. To have a bill that was so Republican-esque that was negotiated, and then Republicans thought they had a deal, and then Donald Trump comes in and says no. It's like, come on. So I hope the public understands the dangers that this man presents. But comprehensive border security without comprehensive immigration reform won't work.
President Biden has said that if given the authority, he was prepared to shut down the southern U.S. border. Would he be right or wrong to do so?
I would advise him not to do that. We have to have comprehensive immigration reform. Again, border security without comprehensive immigration reform, it just won't work. And I was born and raised in El Paso, Texas, in a border town, in an immigrant community. And we have asylum laws in place. What these Republican governors are doing and what is taking place is unconscionable, pitting residents against immigrants. We need to make sure that, and the way I look at immigration reform is there are three stools of that, three legs of the stool. It's got to be orderly or a due process, and it's got to be humane. And what is taking place now and shutting down the border is not orderly, it's not humane, and doesn't provide for due process. This is a country, a state built on immigrants, work, and immigrants coming to help build this country. The economy relies on immigrants. We have a lot of jobs that could be filled, and immigrants contribute immensely to the culture, the economic life, vitality. They come here to make America better and make their families better. And so why would we not try to find a pathway to citizenship as well as whatever the president needs to do to make it orderly? But I don't agree with what is taking place now in terms of the debate. I don't know where it's going, but it sounds like a part of what the prior bill would have incorporated that Donald Trump killed. So I wouldn't support that.
So what are the pathways to citizenship that you would support?
Well, one is Senator Padilla has a bill that I think is very important that I would support in the Senate, and that is once someone is here for 7 years, green card automatically after 7 years. Right now it takes sometimes 10, 12, 15, 20 years just to get a green card. We need to do that. Secondly, Dreamers and their families. Pathway to citizenship, they should be citizens right now. They're as American as I am. And so we need to make sure that Dreamers are first priority in terms of citizenship. Just incidentally, did you know, and this is something as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I tell people it took place this year. Dreamers, because it's so insidious, we can pay interns to work in our congressional offices in the district and at the Capitol, but we can't pay Dreamers. We can't pay young people to work in our offices. My district, 33% immigrants. I can't pay a young person to be an intern. And so in the Appropriations Committee, tried through an amendment to be able to just use some of our members' representation allowance to pay interns. Republicans, no. Yeah, and those are just small steps that I would take in the Senate to fight for until we can pass comprehensive immigration reform. But that's one step I would take toward that. And then making sure that public benefits are available for immigrants. Immigrants are here working. They deserve, they contribute taxes, pay taxes, and so they should benefit from public benefits.
The last question before I hand it off to my colleague is, you have supported reducing the budgets for Border Patrol and ICE. How should the administration deal with the surge of migrants?
How should they deal with ICE and Homeland Security?
With, supporting cities along the borders and others that are dealing with the surge.
The administration should, we need to surge and infuse and invest money into these cities and counties that Governor Abbott and all of them are, playing games with immigrant lives and residents' lives. So I think the federal government, and I know we have the resources to do that, we need to invest in cities so that they can provide immigrants a decent, safe place to live and a pathway to, the court system so that they can get on their pathway to citizenship and a green card, and a way to engage in job training and get a job. There are plenty of jobs that are going unfilled now. And so the federal government has a responsibility to make it happen within these cities. And Republicans, again, are saying no. I don't know. Donald Trump and Republicans that's true. They're saying no, but I think the Democrats and the administration need to find a way to help these, jurisdictions provide what they need to provide for immigrants. Because what's happening is it's this whole effort of these governors are turning residents against immigrants and causing a lot of chaos. And I think that's wrong.
But given the record number of migrants at the border right now in the last few years, is it possible that some of these changes that you advocate to make it even easier for a pathway to citizenship or to get a job, things like that, could just encourage more and more people to come, and we're already unable to deal with the number as it is?
Yeah, well, we need, first, again, we need to invest more in judges and in ensuring that lawyers and the services are available for immigrants. And we have unfortunately cut back budgets on that. So we need to make sure that the processes are established that are fully funded for that. Next, it's important, and I think the Vice President's doing a good job in making sure that we invest in these countries where people are fleeing. And I've talked to a lot of immigrants. Let me tell you, during the Donald Trump administration, I went to McAllen, Texas. I went to the Homestead. I actually helped close that detention center down. Went to San Antonio, El Paso. I went to these detention camps, and they were deplorable. Children were separated from their parents, sleeping under these tinfoil Mylar blankets. Families in uniforms, prison uniforms, in these private prisons. It was awful. And everyone I talked to, they didn't want to leave their home. They don't want to leave home. They want to be able to be free from violence, and the drug cartels and what's taking place in a lot of these countries. Also, they want to be able to take care of their families and economic security. So there are reasons why people leave. They're not leaving only to just leave. They prefer to stay home, and I think most studies and most reports will show you that. And so we have got to do more, I think, in these countries in the Northern Triangle and beyond. Even Africa now, we see, and that's another issue around immigration, the way African and immigrants from Haiti and the Caribbean are treated. I saw during the stay in Mexico policy of the Trump administration, I went down to the Tijuana border, and it was deplorable what they were doing and how they were handling Africans from these countries in Mexico. And so it's complicated, but I think that we have to invest more in these countries to help stabilize and ensure there's some economic stability, as well as help reduce the crime and the violence and the cartels and the drugs that are the reasons for for people leaving.
We're going to bring it back home to California, some of the major issues facing the state right now. Had a big year last year of labor activity in California. You've mentioned your support for a policy to allow striking workers to receive unemployment benefits, which is, a fund that businesses and employers do pay into. Should employers have to contribute to that benefit for their workers to go on strike?
Absolutely. First, I was really proud of all the unionized California efforts. I was on several of the picket lines this summer, and I think that that raised the level of awareness of what working men and women here in this state go through. They just can't afford to live here. And so, yes, unionized California is extremely important. And I think that, when workers pay into a fund, then if they go on strike, they should be able to be eligible for their unemployment benefits. That's just fair.
Right. And another big issue, as facing the state, is housing and homelessness. We're at crisis levels. Governor Newsom has a mental health measure on the March ballot to try to address some of that. Do you support that measure?
I am looking at it. I believe that it's something we should support. My background is in mental health. I have my MSW. I'm a psychiatric social worker by profession. I started a community mental health center. And I want to make sure, one is that because I know a large percentage, I believe it's 60% of people who are unsheltered get arrested. And so I want to make sure that in any of these measures that the criminalization of people living unfortunately on the streets don't involve an effort toward, as a last resort, putting them in jail. And so I think this measure is a good measure, but I'm still looking at it to be sure that the detail, of course, you know, the devil is in the details, but if it's going to help in terms of the mental health crisis, and if it's not going to criminalize people who are unsheltered, but help them get care, the mental health services, and help them into shelter, then I think it's worth supporting.
Have you decided how you're voting on it?
I haven't decided yet how I'm voting. I'm still, again, I'm reviewing it. I'm leaning toward voting for it, but I want to be clear that I still want to check a few of the provisions out.
And then another issue having to do with homelessness that is kind of up before the Supreme Court as well this year. Do you think cities and counties should have the authority to clear encampments even if there isn't a shelter bed available?
If they should have the authority, I think that they should be able to work with the community, everyone in a coordinated fashion, to be sure that people have safe and clean places to live. And they should be able, we should invest in mental health services and affordable housing and shelters as the first place that people who are unsheltered go. But in cities, I mean, cities should be able to have the resources, and I think most cities, I know Mary Bass is doing a really good job in trying to make sure that people are treated with dignity and in a humane fashion. And so I don't believe that the police should be called in because that starts a cycle of criminalization. And so I don't believe cities should have the jurisdiction or the authority to arrest people who are living on the street. I think that we have, as again in the United States Senate, I would make sure that what I propose in terms of my work on housing, actually Congresswoman Waters' bill is one in terms of the homelessness, ending homelessness, would be a bill that I would want to champion so the federal government could get in and invest more into cities to be able to make sure they have the resources to not send people to jail if they don't have the shelter. But there are plenty of buildings in California now that are vacant. You know, I know there are a lot of zoning requirements, but I think that we can build out more places for people to live if we're smart about it.
I'm going to ask a couple questions about crime and criminal justice, which is a huge concern for a lot of Californians. What is one immediate piece of legislation you would propose to address rising concerns about crime?
One piece of legislation. We would, we've had a Safe Communities bill passed. I think, and I don't know the exact legislation, but I can tell you what I think we need to pass is the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, first of all, so that we can get police reform, which is extremely important in terms of holding police officers accountable and making sure that we have a police force that is accountable to the community. But secondly, gun control. I would say making sure that I would lead to reinstitute what Senator Feinstein led on for many years, and that's the assault weapon ban. When that was in place, homicides, I believe, went down, I don't know, 50%, but crime went down. It was reduced significantly. Getting AK-47s off the street and banning ghost guns. So much of this has to do with gun safety. And so as a member now of the Gun Violence Task Force, I would want to set up a gun violence task force in the Senate to look at all of the issues around gun safety, because that's such a, guns are rampant. Even though California has some of the toughest gun laws, as long as guns can be transported from other states, you see what we have here in California. And so having a national standards in terms of background checks, in terms of red flag warnings, in terms of assault weapon bans, and banning these weapons of war on the street would be probably the first that I would look at.
Thank you. I mentioned before, I'm an East Bay resident. I'm very defensive of Oakland, but it does have its issues. So do you believe that Oakland's mayor and Alameda's County's district attorney have made any mistakes in their approach to crime? And what do you think about recall?
Well, recalls, I'm not supporting recalls, first of all. Secondly, every elected official makes mistakes, but I think what's taking place now in terms of just calling in and having, the state help, this partnership with the federal government, which I work on day and night in terms of investments from Department of Justice with the state and with the local police departments, I think is the right way to approach public safety in Oakland. Secondly, we have to free up the police department and police officers for the violent crimes that are taking place. And I fund and I believe in community funded projects and earmarks, and I've been able to fund several $1 million for programs that utilize people from the community as violence interrupters. We train young people, formerly incarcerated individuals, formerly gang members who know the streets, who have a good sense of what's happening, and they go out and they stop crimes from being committed, and it works. Ceasefire works, and it's important that we understand the underlying conditions also as we approach public safety and reducing crime, and that's making sure we have good schools, health care, that young people have options, and that the punishment is appropriate for the crime. And we've got to, everyone wants to be safe, every community, and so I don't support defund, the police department, none of that. But I do say we need to reimagine what it's going to take to reduce crime. And so what's taking place now in Oakland is, I think, a good first step, but we have to build upon the community and build upon making sure that everyone feels safe and is part of the solution. And I think that we're on the right track.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears now and talk about climate change. California will require all cars, trucks, and SUVs sold in the state to generate zero emissions by 2035. Do you support making that a federal policy?
Yeah, I support it. I think there are a couple of caveats to this, though. We have to I support it, but we have to make sure that people who are low income and people who can't afford new EVs have access to the type of whatever it takes to be able to afford to buy these EVs, because it's extremely important. Also, more charging stations, say at public housing units. So we have a lot of infrastructure, I think, to do, and the federal government should invest in the infrastructure. More charging stations, they should be at places of work and public housing. And then the tax credit, sometimes, if people aren't making enough money to get a tax credit, we've got to figure out a strategy where that if it's not appropriate because they're not making enough money to get the credit, then what do we do to make sure that they can get an EV? And I know that it doesn't mean they have to give up their car if they're driving. It's just they can't buy a new car, which is good. We've got again, born and raised in El Paso, Texas, in a community where there was a smelter that emitted chemicals in our neighborhood, black and brown neighborhood. Everyone got sick. My mother's COPD, lung disease. People were just, so I became an environmentalist at a young age. And anything we can do to wean ourselves from fossil fuels to a green economy is a good thing. We just have to make sure it's equal, and people who are low income and working families have access to the same kind of alternatives.
Do you propose any other fix besides the tax credit, just to make it more EV technology vehicles more affordable to low-income households?
Well, I think maybe a subsidy. Again, when you talk about the federal government has a lot of money, a lot of money, and so why not? We subsidize major corporations. The Inflation Reduction Act had some good strategies in good provisions, I think. But whatever it takes to equalize this is something we need to do. And I think there may be a level of income that would qualify, if it's low income enough where you couldn't afford to buy an EV, then perhaps a federal investment would make sense.
Thank you. One last question. How would you, on climate, how would you prevent higher taxes and fees on fossil fuel companies from being passed on to the consumer?
Well, I believe that we have to make sure that billionaires, we need to have a fair tax structure for corporations and for billionaires. Right now, billionaires and corporations, they're not paying their fair share of taxes. And so we have to go back to the drawing board when these Trump-era tax cuts expire and make sure that the tax code and the tax formulas are such that more taxes are being paid by billionaires and millionaires and billionaires and corporations. And I think that would help tremendously.
Well, that would force them to pay more tax, but what's to stop them from simply saying, well, we're going to raise our prices and pass this on to
Well, we have to have some controls. We have to have some regulations. I believe, in a democracy, corporations, again, they're not people. They have to be, in many respects, I won't say regulated to the extent that they can't make a profit. But when you look at CEO compensation, when you look, and I have a bill, the Oligarch Act, that I work with in the Senate, to try to make sure that windfall profit taxes are raised, that they're raised, yeah. And so it's a tax system that has to be, in many ways, some guardrails have to be there so that consumers don't end up paying, which is what we're doing now, for tax cuts for the very wealthy and for corporations that are making mega profits now, unprecedented profits. That's not fair to working men and women in California. It's just not fair.
Okay, I get to ask the mean question, I guess, but
that's okay.
What we've consistently seen in the polls so far that you're running in fourth, and often a distant fourth, and you've also struggled to fundraise in a way that's competitive with your opponents. Why do you think that your candidacy is struggling to catch hold with voters right now?
Well, that's really not a mean question. That's a good question. And people need to understand that I'm not of the establishment per se. And I'm really proud of the fact that I have the endorsement of so many ordinary folks, like Working Families Party, for example, many of our LGBTQ plus organizations. I was first vice chair of the Equality Caucus. The endorsement of 6 out of the 8 constitutional officers. Even the mayor of one of my opponent's cities has endorsed me. I have many Latino clubs. Gen Z for Change, Dolores Huerta has endorsed me, Senator Caballero. And so when you look at the multiracial, multi-generational coalition that's people-powered, people-centered, I took the plurality of the votes at the Democratic Convention, California Democratic Convention. So, this is a campaign that, it's harder to raise money because look at who I am, first of all. It's why we need to get to campaign finance reform. I don't raise the millions and millions and millions that my opponents can raise because California is a very expensive state, and my voting record is very progressive, but it speaks to the aspirations of the majority of Californians who are struggling. And so we're working hard, and we've got phone banks. We're doing well in our phone banks. We're doing well in our get out to vote efforts. We're targeting our voters. We're not wasting money I raise. And furthermore, when you look at my record, I have raised money over the years for others. For Democrats. I've help us grow the House of Representatives for women of color, for men, for Democrats all over the state, all over the country. So I've paid my dues, mind you. And I hope I have worked to earn the support of the voters in California, and that's what's important.
Is your progressive message maybe out of out of step with what voters are feeling right now, though?
No, not really, because when you look at voters and undecided voters, when they get to know me, and of course I don't have the money for ads, the millions of dollars for TV ads, but 20 million people out of California are one paycheck away from poverty. I've formerly public assistance, food stamps, Medi-Cal, child care, had to take my kids to class with me at Mills College and UC Berkeley because I couldn't afford child care. People understand, former business owner, I know what it means to create jobs. I had hundreds of employees for 11 years, workers' comp, insurance, benefits, I know what that takes. And so my background resonates with a heck of a lot of people in California. Also being able to work across the aisle with Democrats and with Republicans and with Democrats to get the job done. I mean, I led on so many issues, on reproductive freedom, for example, on abortion rights, ending the Hyde Amendment, which denies access to reproductive health care for low-income women who are primarily black or brown. So I think my agenda speaks to the agenda of the majority of Californians who are not billionaires and who are just struggling to make ends meet. I know what it's like not to be able to find a place to live, to be unsheltered. A lot of people here unsheltered, and so I think it's just the opposite. It's just the opposite, and you don't see the big bucks or the big millions and millions and millions of dollars because I represent people before profits, and again, I need money to raise money, and we're raising it, but to get onto the media, to get more name recognition, which is part of it, is not what I'm doing, because I'm doing my campaign people to people, voter to voter, very targeted. But it's really a great campaign, and young people, around the state, young people are supporting me. Gen Z for Change, our young Democratic clubs, and you know what they tell me? They say, we know who you are. You've been a consistent progressive over the years. You've looked out for us. And then they say, and we trust you, and we know that you will do that in the Senate because you're running not for you, but for us. And so the young people I'm really proud of in terms of their support for my candidacy.
Obviously, there are a couple other Democrats in the race as well who tout many of those same values. Where do you see yourself as most distinguished from them? What is, for an undecided voter who might still be trying to choose between you and Katie Porter and Adam Schiff, what distinguishes your candidacy, and why would you argue that they should support you in this primary rather than those candidates? I
think it's leadership. That's one of the issues. When you see what I've pushed the envelope on early on, just taking on, the whole issue of the authorization to use military forces. Nobody else voted for that. Taking on the issue around ceasefire now, knowing what's taking place that's counterproductive to Israel's security, killing thousands of innocent civilians, stepping out there early on marijuana justice, forming the Cannabis Caucus, helping to fight to legalize cannabis so that the war on drugs can be addressed. Working with Republicans, when you look at, my opponents in terms of fighting against Republicans, which I do, but I've worked with them also. I was able to work with President Bush as much as I was against his policies to establish all of our global AIDS initiatives. To date, I've helped save 25 million lives, and that's because I worked with Republicans to do that. And so I think one of the big differences is I'm a leader. I step out there, and sooner or later, folks fall in line. I was the first one in this race to call for impeachment of Donald Trump in 2017. I voted for a resolution to impeach him. Nobody else in this race did. They dodged that vote. I didn't. When you look at who stood out there and had to take on my own party on the Hyde Amendment, which we were told, oh, don't talk about abortion, don't talk about it. The Hyde Amendment, I did. I worked with organizations around the country, developed the messaging and the polling where I was able to convince Democrats that we should repeal the Hyde Amendment, talk to the president, got him on board. So it's leadership that's important. I know the other night at the debate, Katie Porter said something about audit the Pentagon and all. Well, I'm the one that led with the Republicans to audit the Pentagon, and I almost said, what is wrong with, this is I did that. So I'm just saying it's leadership. And then being a person who has lived experiences. I mean, I'm the only person of color in this race. I know what racial injustice is. I know what it means to try to fight to fix our democracy, because there are people in this country, primarily people of color, and especially African Americans, who have been shut out. And I've been fighting all my life to protect and fix our democracy. And so freedom is really important to me. Reproductive freedom, freedom to love who you desire, freedom to breathe clean air, clean water, economic freedom, you know. So freedom for me as an African American woman is something that's in my DNA. And I've lived many experiences that people here in this state have, and that my opponents, just based on who we are, haven't lived. So there are more differences, I think, than similarities. And it comes from having a lens and a perspective. And when you look at the Senate, you don't see many people that look like me in the Senate since 1789. And again, I have the experience and the background. Since 1789, there have been 3 African American women serving a total of 10 years. 1789. And so that in itself is really antithetical to our democracy. But even more than that, it's important that my perspective, which none of the other candidates have, which is a perspective that many Californians have in terms of just justice and in terms of fighting for policies for everyone that create equity and opportunity and freedom and justice. I've had to do that all of my life, and I'm continuing to do it, and I want to do that in the Senate, and that's a big distinction between myself and other candidates.
Congresswoman, we want to be respectful of your time. You'd said you wanted to make some closing statements.
Sure.
And we'll give you that opportunity
Oh,
now.
okay. Well, listen, I'm really glad.
Can I ask one more real quick one? But so if on March 5th you do not make the top 2, but your fellow Democrats do you plan to endorse one of them for November?
Look, I'm focused on getting into the top 2 March 5th. So you have to stay focused. I'm not even thinking about anything past March 5th, because this is very intense. Phone banking, fundraising, canvassing, traveling, meeting with you guys, the press, you know, so that's what I'm really focused on, okay? And you know, finally I'll just say thank you for inviting myself and the other candidates to be with you. But I want you to know a couple of things. I know what it takes to fix a lot of the problems that California has, because I've experienced many of these obstacles that many Californians are faced with. But more than that, having faced them, I have fought as a public servant, not a career politician, but as a public servant to try to make life better for everyone. And I think it's important that people know that in this race, I'm running to make life better for everyone. And my experience as a negotiator, legislator, appropriator, allows me to hit the ground running when I'm in the Senate. I have been a progressive, but yet I've been able to work with Republicans and Democrats to save lives, to get the job done. And it's important that a perspective from California, such as my perspective, be part of the debate in California. And with you, you get somebody who has been fighting for what's right, but fighting to make life better. And I want to continue to do that in the Senate, and I want people to know, and young people especially, to know that I see them and I hear them and I want them involved. And I want people who haven't been involved to have that voice. And my background and what I have done and what I intend to do is to make sure we open up the space for people to weigh in on public policy, such as on housing, climate change, which is a big priority, climate justice, making sure that frontline communities are, you know, part of the mix in terms of our climate policy, making sure that they know that I have the experience in fighting to fix and protect our democracy. All of the issues that are really important to Californians, I've had experience fighting for, and I know what to do in the Senate, being one of 100. I know how to help fix many of the challenges that we have. And I hope that, you know, I have worked to earn your support. I'm not asking for it based on just Barbara Lee and who I am, but I hope that my experience and what I've done and my commitment to stand alone sometimes when I have to stand alone and fight with my own party if I think that it's wrong. But I hope that people know that I'm fighting for them and want to be your next United States Senator. And my website is barbaraleeforca.com. Go to it and see all of the phenomenal endorsements I have. And of course, you can make a donation if you'd like.